So this is the Mitchell storage area where Senator Mitchell's papers are located. And if you look over here to the left, you'll see row after row after row of boxes. And they're all on compact shelving, which of course allows for denser storage, but also allows for easy accessibility. And so we have here probably 2/3 of the papers that Senator Mitchell donated to us in 1995. Senator Mitchell was class of 1954 at Bowdoin, donated his papers to the college when he retired from the Senate in 1995. Comprises over 1,000 feet of material, rows and rows and rows of boxes and boxes and boxes. They are an incredibly important scholarly resource for people who are interested both in Maine politics and government, but also in national and international politics and foreign affairs because of Mitchell's prominent roles throughout his distinguished career, both nationally and internationally. I thought I'd start with the college yearbook. This is the class of @53 yearbook, but it shows the senator, as folks like to call him, as a basketball player. He's seated down here in at the end of that row. Mitchell comments often that he feels inferior to his brothers who were extremely academically gifted, and how he was somebody with 2 left feet and never really got a chance to shine. But at least he shined well enough to be on the varsity team for basketball. This is a photograph showing Senator Mitchell and Senator Bill Cohen. Cohen was also a Bowdoin alum, class of 1962. Cohen, in fact, was the senior senator from Maine. Mitchell was elected later. So although Mitchell is older, he's always sort of the junior. Maybe that's a thorn in his side when he and Cohen get together, I don't know. But they worked together very closely in the Senate despite being on opposite sides of the aisle. And this is a photograph that shows them in collaboration during the Indian Land Claims Settlement Act in 1980, when Mitchell had first been appointed to the Senate to fill Senator Muskie's vacancy. Muskie had been named the Secretary of State, and Mitchell was appointed to fill his vacant seat in 1980. Then from his early Senate career, some examples of his campaign literature. This shows Mitchell on election night in 1982, the first year that he had to actually run for the seat rather than be appointed for it. It was a tough campaign. He came out on top. Some letters, this one from Strom Thurmond, who at that time was Secretary Pro Tem of the Senate, congratulating Senator Mitchell on his, quote, re-election, although it was really his first election. We continue to get materials from Senator Mitchell's office. He now is with a law firm in New York City and is still getting awards and generating material through his career. And so those things come to us over time. In 1990, having just been elected Senate Majority Leader, Mitchell was involved in the 1990 amendments to the Clear Air Act, and this is a letter from George H.W. Bush thanking him for his collaboration in succeeding in getting that legislation passed. The 1990 amendment was important for us today who pay $4 a gallon for gas, in the sense that it was the amendment that discussed the composition of gas and the introduction of chemicals during certain seasons of the year in order to make for cleaner air. And then a sample of Mitchell's writing style. There are researchers who come because they're interested in particular topics, but there are also people who come because they're interested in particular techniques or approaches. Some people are interested in Mitchell's papers because of his negotiating skills, for instance. And so this is a research question that bridges a variety of the series of records that we have. Others are interested in his rhetoric, how much he was really involved in writing the speeches that he gave. Obviously all politicians have speechwriters, but here's evidence of how intimately he is involved in the writing process, that draft after draft goes through, and he's still penciling at the last minute and striking things out in order to prepare his remarks for the Senate floor in proposing this 1990 legislation. Another part of his career that's really a touchstone is his involvement in the Iran-Contra. hearings. One of the central figures in the congressional hearings was Oliver North, and Mitchell was appointed the person on the committee to interrogate North.
Indeed, it's the very fact that Americans can criticize their government openly and without fear of reprisal that is the essence of our freedom, and that will keep us free.
North had taken a position of imperial righteousness, some people might describe it, and Senator Mitchell in his hearings reminded North that he wasn't the only person who had righteous and imperial positions, and that they weren't necessarily right simply because he asserted them. As a consequence of that, of course, Mitchell became a rock star in the country. People from all over lit up his phones, sending comments of thanks, occasionally comments of anger. But a woman in San Diego, no relation to Mitchell, no reason for her to write aside from her being kind, sends him a card thanking him for doing so much. And in the mailing, she also included a box of See's chocolates. See's, of course, is the big chocolate company in California. People in other parts of the country may not be quite so familiar with it. But the irony here is that Mitchell loves chocolate. I don't know that this woman would have known that. But the story goes that when he's on campaign stops, he had an assistant who was charged with making sure that there were refreshments and things that would keep him happy. And chocolate brownies was on the top of that list. And then a letter here from Orrin Hatch indicating his admiration and respect for Mitchell's participation on the committee. Hatch, of course, on the other side of the aisle. You get a sense from Mitchell's papers that certainly this time in the 80s and the early 90s is a period in time when there is still considerable collegiality and cooperation among politicians regardless of their political beliefs or their party affiliations. He is a loyal alumnus. He comes to events occasionally. He has provided considerable support for the Mitchell Oral History Project. He has delivered addresses from time to time. He does not have a position here and doesn't teach classes, but when he comes, he visits with classes, particularly in the Government and Legal Affairs Department. Whenever he's on campus, he'll come and speak to those students, and I think that's really a terrific experience for them and a great opportunity for him. After he retires from the Senate in 1995, he has a private life that's equally distinguished as his public life has been. He is appointed by the President as a special envoy for Northern Ireland. That then grows into a special appointment, not federally mandated, but internationally mandated, to negotiate the Good Friday Agreement, and that was ratified in 1998. And so what we have here are letters from that time period. Even before he's appointed in 1995, he's communicating with the Prime Minister of Northern Ireland, thanking Mitchell for meeting with him in Washington, D.C. Clearly there's a groundwork that's being laid for these subsequent negotiations. Ultimately then, in 1998, after some false starts and difficulties, the Good Friday Accords are ratified, and here's a letter from Bertie Ahern, who is the Prime Minister of Ireland, thanking Senator Mitchell for the efforts of his commission. And here's a picture with Patrick Mayhew, who is the Foreign Minister for Northern Ireland, getting a sense of the casualness that some of these talks imparted, although typically this is a pre-talk meeting that they're having, but typically a lot of people in the room, and Mitchell spending an awful lot of time simply listening. The part of his negotiation skills that seems to work so well when it works is his ability to bring disparate parties together and simply listen, give everybody a chance to get it off his or her chest, and then ultimately to come to really strong synthesis about what the different issues are, how those can be parsed, and how an accommodation can be reached. And then I guess most recently we think of Mitchell as being the special envoy to the Middle East. An appointment which, when it was made, many of Mitchell's colleagues and friends said, he must be mad, it's just not going to work. and which he stuck out for 2 years, and it did not come to any fruitful result. But I know for a fact how hard he tried, because occasionally we'd need to be in touch with him for some reason or another, and it was always a guess about where he was going to be and how quickly he'd be able to respond. So this one from Hillary Rodham Clinton as Secretary of State, and a second letter of thanks from Barack Obama about the same topic. When he gives speeches and he says that people ask him, you know, what's your most memorable part of your career? He says, well, I will have to say that other people think the most memorable part of my career is the baseball scandal, you know, the steroids in baseball. Those records are not here. He was also involved in the 9/11 Red Cross Fund distributions. Those records are not here because he was working in the capacity of those organizations. So whatever files there are, those are in other places. So you end up with congressional papers, but you end up with split records sometimes too. Folks still have to traipse from institution to institution if they want to pull the whole picture together.